What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the lovely folks at Nerd Tees, and welcome to the Baker's Dozen, lucky week number 13 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2018 CFL regular season. We had kind of a mixed bag of a week in week 12. We were really good straight up. We went 3-1 straight up. That's excellent. That has us 29-17 straight up on the season. Head and shoulders my best season picking the CFL straight up. Against the spread, we were even again. We were 2-2. We just can't seem to consistently get over that 500 hump, but we're going to keep going, see if we can get there this week. That has us an even 23-23 against the spread this season. Over under, we were only 1-2-1. We got our second push of the CFL season on the over under. That has us 24-20-2 over under on the season. Quick peek at the CFL standings. Ottawa still leading the East Division now at 6-4, outscoring opponents 26-23. Hamilton right behind them now at 5-5, outscoring opponents 27-23. So the offense just slightly average higher than Ottawa. Toronto and Montreal each have 3 wins. Toronto's 3-7. Montreal is 3-8. Toronto being outscored 31-21 on average. Montreal being outscored 31-17. We go to the West Division. Calgary still running away with things at 9-1, outscoring opponents 30-17. Saski has jumped up. They are now in second place in the West Division at 6-4. An even split on the scoring there, 25-25. Edmonton also has 6 wins, but theirs are in 11 games. They're 6-5, outscoring opponents 28-25. Winnipeg now under 500 on the season at 5-6, still outscoring opponents 31-26, but it's been a real bad stretch here for the Blue Bombers. BC pulling up the rear in the West Division at 3-6, being outscored 26-22. Week 13 sees the BC Lions come off the bye and the Montreal Alouettes go on to it after winning 2 straight games. So that's, I guess, a blessing and a curse. So we have Ottawa traveling to BC to take on the Lions. And then we have 3 rematches from Labor Day weekend last weekend. They just switch venues. So Hamilton goes to Toronto, Saski goes to Winnipeg, and Calgary goes to Edmonton. Let's start with the REDBLACKS, who are coming off of a 21-11 loss to the Montreal Alouettes. And just when I finally turn around on Ottawa and say, you know what, maybe they're better than I gave them credit for, just when I finally turn around on them, they lay a rotten egg. Against 11 points against Montreal, that's tied with Toronto for the worst scoring defense in the CFL. Trevor Harris went back to being Trevor Harris in that game, threw for 270 yards, nothing wrong with that, but sub 55% completion percentage, did not throw a touchdown, but he did throw an interception. Of note for the REDBLACKS, linebacker Kiron Moore has been suspended for 2 games after a high illegal hit to the head on BJ Cunningham in that Montreal game. It is his second suspension of 2018 for a high hit to the head. And you may remember a few seasons ago, I believe it was, he was also suspended for a high and dangerous hit on John Cornish of the Stampeders. So certainly not without precedent. Kiron Moore, his second suspension of 2018. And that means the REDBLACKS defense takes a hit. He's not their primary defensive player, but he's a playmaker on defense, and he's not going to be there. The BC Lions also coming into this game off of a loss, a 24-21 decision against Saskatchewan back in week 11. It was the defense that ruled the second half of that football game. Just 7 points scored total in the second half of that football game. And the BC Lions, the offense really sputtered in the second half. BC converted just 5 first downs in the entire second half of that football game. Both quarterbacks underperformed in that game, Travis Lulay and Zach Collaros, which is, again, a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing if the BC Lions defense can force a repeat performance, like Collaros really struggled in that game. If the Lions defense can also do that to Trevor Harris, which by his results last week, it seems like they certainly can. If they can cause Harris to struggle, that's a good thing for the defense. But Travis Lulay needs to be better. Lulay needs to be better if BC wants to win this game. They're playing a team that is I guess on paper, certainly by record, better than they are. So they absolutely need the defense to step up, and they need Travis Lulay to play better football than he's played over the last few weeks. I feel like this is a pretty even matchup, and so does Vegas when we talk about the line. So I really had to do a deep dive on certain things to try to find some kind of edge or some kind of area that BC specifically really needs to focus on. BC, specifically on the O-line and on the D-line, have taken 35 penalties this season. Ottawa's only taken 26. BC has played one fewer game than Ottawa has, so they have fewer line penalties in more games, do the Red Blacks. BC's got to clean that up. I think you got to play disciplined football. Certainly to beat a team that arguably is better than you are, you have to play disciplined football. Kind of like I said before, Ottawa had 1 week. 1 week of looking like wolves. I will not mistake sheep for wolves again. Ottawa's kicking off a streak here of, I think, 5 straight games against the West Division. I don't think it gets off to a good start. I'm taking the BC Lions in this game at home. I think Lulay steps up. I think the defense steps up. I'm going to take the Lions here to, quote-unquote, upset a better team in Ottawa. Although on the line, Vegas is actually favoring the hometown Lions. BC favored just by 1.5 points in this game right now, so obviously I like them to win, so I'm going to hammer BC and take the Lions minus 1.5 against the spread. Total in the game is 51.5 points. It's a low total, but I expect defense to be the order of the day for both of these teams, so it's a 50. I'm going to stay under on it. So we like the BC Lions to win. We like the BC Lions to cover minus 1.5 points. Like the game to stay under 51.5 points. So for these other 3 games, like I mentioned, they're rematches from last week. So I might as well kind of deal with the teams interchangeably. And I kind of tried to make the points reflective of each other as we're going. So let's look at the Hamilton-Toronto rematch, now moving from the Hammer to Toronto. Hamilton wins that game 42-28 last week. It was less perfect for the Ticats than the final score would seem to indicate. I mean, they had to go on an 18-0 run I think it was in the second half. They had to go on an 18-0 run in a game that they only won by 14 points. So they had to come from behind, and they had to do it big in order to win that game. For the Argos, that game was a sandwich without the bread. And this is what I mean by that. All 28 of their points, they scored 28 points, that's fine. All 28 of those points came in the second quarter and the third quarter. It was 14 each, which means they had nothing in the first quarter and they had nothing in the fourth quarter. They're not good. Jeremiah Masoli absolutely outclassed McLeod Bethel-Thompson in that football game. Masoli threw for 74%, Bethel-Thompson only 48. That is not going to get it done. 385 yards for Jeremiah Masoli, just 163 for McLeod Bethel-Thompson. Not effective moving the ball through the air. Masoli 3 touchdowns, did throw a pick. Bethel-Thompson did not throw a touchdown, but also threw a pick. And in the same vein, look, Toronto still scored 28 points. All 3 of Toronto's offensive touchdowns did not come from their starting quarterback. They came from the other quarterback. It was James Franklin. He ran for 2 and he threw a little 3-yard touchdown pass. Is it time to start talking about putting James Franklin back in as a starting quarterback? Like, look, both Franklin and MBT are not starting quarterbacks. They're both backup quarterbacks. Like, somebody's got to be the starter, right? Somebody's got to be the starter. Unless you're rotating in a lot more than they have been doing, somebody's got to be the starting quarterback. So is it better to have MBT as the starting quarterback and have Franklin coming off the bench, or vice versa? Or is it time to explore going out and maybe trading for a quarterback? I can think of one that Montreal's probably not going to be using anymore. Despite having the fumble that led to a defensive touchdown going the other way, Alex Green absolutely feasted on the Argos defense. 115 yards rushing on just 18 carries, found the end zone twice. He added 28 yards on 3 receptions. Alex Green has been a monster in the last little while. I think that's now 7 touchdowns in 4 games for Alex Green. So he has really taken the run game for the Ticats and said, give it to me. And in just another display of how misleading the final score in this game was, Toronto only possessed the ball for 25 minutes. They only had 3.7 yards per carry on the ground. James Wilder Jr. had a good first half, but then they basically abandoned him in the second half and gave him almost nothing in the run game or in the pass game. They took 10 penalties, 109 yards, 6 penalties and 61 of those yards coming on defense. Defensive penalties will kill you. This game would have been a beatdown if it wasn't for James Franklin finishing and converting and putting points on the board. If not for James Franklin, this game is not competitive. Statistically speaking, Toronto's offense does play better at home, so that's a good thing for them this week. But that game to me last week displayed that this is way more uneven a matchup than it might look like even on paper. So you got to take Hamilton here again. Hamilton is just in a different class than the Argos are right now. The Argos are essentially a rebuilding franchise that hasn't really started their rebuild yet. So look, these two teams are in different classes. I'm taking the Ticats here, even though the game is in Toronto. Hamilton favored by 5 points against the spread in this game. I took Toronto +8, I think it was, last week. They were looking real good to cover that through about 3/4. Didn't work out. Now Hamilton only favored by 5 in this one. You have to take the Ticats. I mean, they just won the game by 14. Sure, they had to come from behind to do it, but Hamilton's just a better football team. You're getting it for less than a touchdown. Take Hamilton -5. Total in the game is set at 52.5 points. I think I still have to go under on it, even though the two teams just combined for, what was it, 72? What did we say the score was? 42-28. So, 70 points. They just went for 70 for whatever reason. I just don't look at this game as playing out the same way as last week. So I'm going to play it safe, and I'm going to stick with the under on this one again. Under 52.5 points in Hamilton, Toronto. I like the Ticats to win and the Ticats to cover -5. We'll take this opportunity now, as we always do, to pump the tires of our good friends at NerdTees. NerdTees.ca. Promo code is BWFinest. If you use that promo code at NerdTees.ca, what are you going to save? I know I tell you every week, but it's 15% off your order at NerdTees by using my promo code. If you're in Canada, you're going to get free shipping on any order over $50. If you're in the US, you can change the currency to the US dollar, or you get the great bounce in the exchange rate between Canada and the US. Whether you're American, whether you're Canadian, there's no reason not to take a peek at NerdTees, because you're going to either find something that you're going to love, you're going to find something for somebody else to love. Look, you got these gift-giving holidays. They're coming up. Christmas going to be here sooner than you might think. All kinds of incredible stuff on nerdtees.ca. Use that promo code, save some money, and make somebody fall in love. Let's go to Winnipeg now for a rematch between the Blue Bombers and the Roughriders. Green versus blue, if you will. We'll start with the road Roughriders. Saski winning that game last week 31-23 over Winnipeg. It was actually a pretty tight game at the half. I think it was like a 3-point game or something like that. But a 14-point fourth quarter for Saski, plus stout second half defense got the job done for them. Winnipeg just could not keep up. I think that's either Winnipeg's third or fourth straight loss, something like that. So, I mean, Winnipeg definitely going in the wrong direction. And for the Blue Bombers, I think what really buried them was ball security. They were not able to hold on to the football when they had it. They turned the ball over 3 times. Saski only turned the ball over once. It's tough to lose the turnover battle by 2 and win the football game. The Roughriders defense, when I talked about the stout defense in the second half, the defense did allow drives of 6, 8, and 7 plays. So getting into kind of longer drives. But off of those drives, they only allowed a pair of field goals, so it's only 6 points, and generated a turnover from a forced fumble. So the defense bent a little bit, but when it was time to make the play, they made the play. They kept the big points off the board. Just allowed little chips here and there, field goal here, field goal there, generating a turnover. The defense really won them the game. And on the Blue Bomber side, they absolutely waste one of Andrew Harris's best games of the season. Touched the ball 16 times, 173 yards, and the vast majority of that, I think all but 15, coming on the ground. So Andrew Harris ran all over the Roughriders. He didn't get into the end zone, but the rest of the team around him just generated nothing. I mean, it was Andrew Harris and not even everybody else. It was Andrew Harris and a bunch of popcorn vendors. And in saying that, I kind of pinned some of that on Matt Nichols. It was a really inefficient game for Nichols. I believe he only threw, 54%. That spoiled what was a disciplined and winnable game for Winnipeg. They took very, very, very few penalties in this game. Actually, both teams, there really weren't many penalties in the football game as a whole, but that inefficiency, that inability to move the ball when it's not being moved by Andrew Harris, it spoiled a winnable game. Winnipeg could have, and maybe even arguably should have, won that football game. Of note for the Roughriders, wide receiver Kiron Moore, and he's only 21 years old. Kiron Moore with a 65-yard punt return touchdown in the second quarter. He added 42 yards on 3 catches in the receiving game. That is his first CFL touchdown at just 21 years old. Only his second game in the league. So already at 21 years old, Kiron Moore kind of proving he can be a dynamic and impact player for the Roughriders in the CFL. Between these two teams, I want to say that Winnipeg has to be the team that's the most desperate. They've lost 3 straight games. They're going in the wrong direction. It's the West Division. You got to think they've got to be the most desperate team. But both of these teams have to be desperate because Saski is looking up at Calgary and they say, we can still get there. It's not completely out of the question that we could catch them for the West Division, which is really, really important come playoff time. So it's not out of reach. So Saski's also desperate in this situation. Winnipeg, despite their desperation, they're not good enough right now to be able to trust, especially on the defensive side. The defense looks like it's completely collapsed. Even though the game is in the peg and on the betting line, Winnipeg is the favorite in this matchup, I have to take Saski. I just saw Saski beat them. Again, they're just not good enough to trust right now. So I'm going to take Saskatchewan on the road in Winnipeg to beat the Blue Bombers. On the line, Winnipeg is favored by 3.5 points at home. Even if I was on Winnipeg, I couldn't take them to cover that number over a field goal, not a chance. So even if you're taking Winnipeg to win the game straight up, there's an interesting parlay in that situation. But look, take your underdog points there and take Saskatchewan plus the 3.5. I like them to win the game outright. Total in the game is 53.5, and I think this is the only game of the 4 that I'm going to have going over. 53.5, it's a lot of points. It's the biggest total of the week, but I think this game goes over. I think you see a lot of offense in this game. Andrew Harris, after a great game like that, has to be hungry to finish and put points on the board. I think it's going to be a bit of a shootout despite 2 good defenses. So let's go over 53.5 points in Winnipeg, Saskatchewan. I like Saski to win the game straight up, and I like Saski plus 3.5 on the line. And the last game we're going to look at is the rematch of West Division powerhouses, this time Calgary traveling to Edmonton to take on the Eskimos. So we will start with the 9-1 Stampeders. They won that game last week just by a field goal, 23-20 on home field. Bo Levi-Mitchell leaving the game around the third quarter, I believe it was, leaving the game briefly. Looked like a knee injury, looked like a non-contact knee injury. I'll tell you what it looked like. It looked like he tore his ACL. And I was watching the game and I was like, oh, he just went down and nobody touched him. That's immediately every football fan is like, well, that's a torn ACL. Apparently it wasn't. Apparently he just kind of maybe overextended it a little bit because he went back out a series later. So it looked worse than it is, we think. For Edmonton, this was just another game where the offense either scores in bunches or doesn't score at all. 14 of their 20 points coming in, I think it was the second quarter. Well, they only had a field goal and a field goal on the other side of it. So they either score a ton or they don't score anything. And you got to balance that out. Edmonton has been guilty of this a lot, not balancing out the offense, just kind of scoring in bunches. And against a really good team, it is tough to win that way. Speaking of injuries, it seemed like this game was nothing but injuries. So you look at the injury bug and the injury sequel. The injury bug for Calgary does strike. Wide receiver Kamar Jordan, this close to being the top receiver in the CFL. Kamar Jordan, he gets his leg rolled up on during a block. As far as I know, there's no update on it, but it's been rumored that it's probably going to end his season. And if it does end his season, what a Like, what a blow. Like, what a blow to him personally. Not so much to Calgary. Calgary can be next man up. Calgary's got a bunch of talented people on that team. But, like, just what a blow to Kamar Jordan personally. And then on Edmonton's side, you got another one of the top receivers in the CFL, Darrell Walker. He exits this game with his own kind of leg injury. The extent of that injury is unknown. Hopefully it's not bad, but it could be really bad, and it's so demoralizing and so frustrating for a player to have to go through something like that when you're so close to being, heralded as one of the best at what you do. For the Stampeders, it was hard to argue that the player of the game is the guy that kicks the balls. On a Calgary team that only had, I believe, one offensive touchdown in that game, Rene Paradis, cool under pressure, man. 5 of 6, including a 43-yard field goal with no time left on the clock to win that football game for Calgary. 5 field goals from Paradis. Sure, he did miss the one, but we're not going to quibble about that. For the Eskimos, CJ Gable and Duke, they came to play. They had great games. The defense balled out. The defense played really well against a really good offense in Calgary. You just need that little bit more of everything. And that's one of those things that you can get when you shift from playing on the road to playing at home. It feels like every Calgary game for the rest of the year is probably going to be looked at this way, but we're starting to get to that point in the CFL season where it's a must-win game. You're in must-win territory for every team that's not named Calgary. For Edmonton especially, they see that they've been passed by Saskatchewan now. They're right there with Saski, and Calgary is still within reach. So I've got to take the desperate team here. Calgary, there's no desperation whatsoever. And to be perfectly honest, if it was me, Bo Levi Mitchell would not be starting this football game. I want him to rest because there's winnable games or games that need to be won later in the season. This game is not imperative, but I'm not the coach, so I can't make that decision. So it wouldn't be me, but I have to take the Esks here because they are the desperate team. There's no desperation on Calgary's side whatsoever. They can relax and just play football. If they win, awesome. If they lose, it's not the end of the world. Against the spread, Calgary is favored by 3 points on the road. Edmonton, a 3-point dog at home. I like them to win. Definitely going to take Edmonton +3. Total in the game is 53 points. Honestly, I think it stays under because, again, who knows with all these high-profile players that either are going to be limited or may not be in the game at all. The offensive potential for both of these teams does come down a little bit. Still set at 53 points. I'm going to tell you to take the under. But I like Edmonton to win and cover the +3. All right, folks, there you go. Week 13, CFL pick show for 2018. Here are the picks one more time. I like BC at home to beat Ottawa. I like BC to cover -1.5 in a game that stays under 51.5 points. I like Hamilton on the road in Toronto to beat the Argos. I like Hamilton to cover -5 against the spread in a game that also stays under 52.5 points. I like Saskatchewan on the road in Winnipeg to beat the Blue Bombers. I'm going to take Saski +3.5 against the spread in the only game that goes over this week, goes over 53.5 points. And I like the Edmonton Eskimos at home to beat Calgary. I like Edmonton to cover +3 against the spread in a game that stays under 53 points. There you go, folks. That's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the lovely folks at NerdTees. Go to nerdtees.ca. Use that promo code BWFinest. I hope you watched the week 1 episode of the NFL Pick Show. It's doing really well. Pop over there. It's a full hour. Grab your popcorn or get on SoundCloud or iTunes. You can get it there as well as a podcast. Take the show on the go. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed this one. We will see you again for week 14. Let's see how these rematches play out.